Welcome to this session of Intercultural Dialogue. The purpose of this session is to listen for understanding and come to an agreement between the parties. The discussion will be led by three stakeholders, Ximena Ramírez, representing the indigenous groups, Mariana Nava, representing the Mexican government, and me, Paulina, Alexandra, representing the International Labor Organization. This discussion will take place during 1996.
Well, to start this dialogue, I'm representing the EZLN group. For years, indigenous groups have been discriminated against and marginalized. A large percentage of our community do not have access to basic services, and our rights are not being respected or fulfilled. In February of the present year, our people had a dialogue with the Mexican government thanks to the international pressure, where we signed the San Andres Agreement, and the government promised us that we will be recognized as a group in the Mexican Constitution. However, they ignored this agreement and the promised practices have been forgotten. They also criminalized us and sent military forces to stop our movement. We ask ourselves, why were the San Andres Accords not fulfilled? We think the government sees us as an obstacle for the policies that will come later, such as their mega projects. Freedom, democracy, work, education, health, housing, justice, culture, food independence, peace, information, and land are the rights that we're asking to be respected. But nevertheless, the government retailed, attacked, and displaced us. No matter how many marches we do and how many agreements are signed, our proposals and requests have not been respected. We are tired of not being recognized, and we just ask the San Andres Agreement to be fulfilled, as well as the release of the Zapatista prisoners and the withdrawal and closure of the military positions. We're humans, and we are entitled to everything we have mentioned and more.
Regarding the international conventions, by not directly proposing a practical application of autonomy in the constitution reform regarding indigenous rights and culture, the government has still not fulfilled one of the commitments it made before the international community in 1990. The convention number 169 of the International Labor Organization, and in particular the San Andres agreements previously mentioned, signed by the Zapatista Army and the federal government in February 16, 1996. The international law that can secure people's rights and lands and rights is the International Labor Organization, and it recognizes and protects tribal people's land ownership rights and a set of series of minimum UN standards regarding consultation and consent. On the other hand, the military offensive of February 9, 1995, launched by President Ernesto Zedillo, caused the displacement of around 22,000 people. There were actions such as kidnappings, torture, destruction of crops and belongings, with the purpose to provoke the massive displacement of the opposition and to destroy the social basis of the Zapatista army, to dismantle the communities and weaken the economic resistance. Although forced displacements in Mexico has multiple causes, the conflict in Chiapas is paramount. According to the United Nations, no peace agreement has been reached between the parties to the conflict that effectively takes into account the political, economic, and social grievances of the indigenous population, which is a fundamental cause of these agreements. According to a study by the UN, from 1994 to 1998 will be expected between 50,000 and 84,000 people, victims of displacements forced by the armed conflict derived from the Zapatista uprising. Also, according to the United Nations, there is a lack of official statistics on the displaced in Mexico. it is essential to obtain an accurate overview of the current situation and the specific needs of the displaced in order to provide the necessary resources, both human and material, and the preparation of policies, strategies, and programs. Mexico was called on to make its policy and coordination structures known to the international community and to request UN and international cooperation in response to the needs of the displaced, especially in areas that the government cannot access. The increasing number of small-scale forced displacements as a result of paramilitary action and the coinciding legal, commercial, and military objectives to evict Zapatista communities from the land they have occupied may be clear indication that Chiapas is closer to an escalation of the conflict than to peace.
Today I'm representing the government of Mexico, and I want to start by saying that since the very first moment that this conflict began, in a statement given by President Salinas de Gortari just after the Ejército Zapatista uprising, he said that its main priority was to respond and to repel the aggression in order to protect the sovereignty and the order of the country and to protect the civilians that were caught in the crossfire. This was the main objective of Salinas de Gortari government, as well as the Cedillo government, which is the president that is as of 1996 in charge of the country. So starting from that point of view, the government only wants to make sure that the civilians are saved. And therefore, as the Ejército Zapatista was the one to start the fire, the government has only responded to it in order to repel it. Also, the government has indeed created forms of dialogue between the Ejército Zapatista and the government itself. As for example, on February 16, when the Zapatistas and the federal government signed the agreements on indigenous laws and culture, in which the government committed to recognizing indigenous people in the Constitution, something that the government indeed did by signing the dialogues of San Andres. Also, I want to just mention the fact that the government put on charge Esteban Moctezuma as member of the Secretaría de Gobernación in order to create these safe spaces of dialogue between all the parties involved. And also the government created the Harmony and Pacification Commission, the COCOPA, which is a bicameral legislative commission formed since March 1995 by the Mexican government. And it is formed of Mexican chambers of deputies and senators, so they can directly assist the needs of the indigenous groups here in Mexico. Also, something that is important is to note that the government has tried several times, not only to create these forms of dialogue, but to give actual help to these communities. For example, we have the project or the program Solidaridad, which started with President Salinas de Gortari, and a program which the President Cedillo has made his and is still running to this day. Also, something that I believe it's worth mentioning is the fact that right now Mexico is facing economic crisis as the effect of tequila. If we can go to the next slide, please. So right now the government also has the economic limitations, so to say, that this tequila effect has bring to our country.
Okay, now that we have listened to the three perspectives of the stakeholders, we will come to discuss our proposals and ultimately, hopefully, come to an agreement. So as for the United Nations, it is proposed to conduct first a diagnosis officially in Mexico to learn about the situation of internally displaced people in the country in order to formulate recommendations with which to improve the national and international response to this issue. And 3 action areas are considered. First, the promotion of public policies to strengthen the rule of law through systems of indicators. Also, institutional development of criminal justice, the penitentiary system, and security supported by local diagnosis previously mentioned. And third, strengthening of the local and state capacities for the reduction and non-violent resolution of conflicts and the construction of a culture of peace. The proposal for the Congress of the Federation to carry out a constitutional reform that will introduce the concept, recognize the figure of the internally displaced people, because until now it is non-existent in Mexico. So that would be sort of like the first step, and then also, I guess, work with the commissions and the programs that Mexico has already begun, so the international community can strengthen and promote those programs. But now we're gonna listen to the proposal of the indigenous groups, please.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the international organization that's here with us today for their commitment with this dialogue, and thank you for the proposals. As I said before, we want to ask the complete fulfillment of the San Andres agreements. And also, I want to ask, as a representative of the community, to the government to release the Zapatistas prisoners and the closure of the military positions that they have put in our communities. And for this, I ask to update the San Andres agreement, where a section of penalties is added to the actor who does not comply with its part of the agreement, always respecting ourselves and having this continuous dialogue where when differences can exist.
Yes, the government agrees with both parties in the sense that we have to do something. Also, speaking a little bit about the situation with the Zapatistas in prison, the government agrees that political pardons can be offered to the members of the Zapatista army under the condition that they commit not to carry out terrorist attacks in the capital, like those of 1994. Also, the Commission agrees with the international organization that we have to strengthen the already existing commissions and programs in order to guarantee the well-being of all Mexicans. Moreover, of those civilians that are part of the community, of the indigenous communities. And the government proposes to do so by giving a little bit of more power to the Commission of Harmony and Pacification. However, it will function only as a communication channel, a direct communication channel, since the federal government will still be the one that maintains the country's sovereignty and decision-making capacity, if that's okay with both parties involved.
Yes, well, as the indigenous group representative, we are committed to respect this new request from the government, as long as mentioned above, there is respect and recognition on their part.
Yes, also by the international community, at least all of the programs carried out by the United Nations. We are also committed to this request, and we would also agree that it is important to keep this all of the programs and durable solutions that will take place locally and focused.
Yes, thank you very much. So in the end, well, we will be able to create these direct and safe communication channels between all the parties involved, with the participation of international organizations and with the participation, obviously, of indigenous groups, in order to create an effective dialogue, to create and design concrete actions that will benefit all of those involved. Thank you very much. And now we will show you our references used for this discussion.